studio. This is Emma. It's lovely to have you here again with me. It's been, I feel, hardly any time at all since I last filmed. But there we go, that's how it is. Time seems to expand and contract at the moment. Some days go really quickly and some days just seem to go on forever, don't they? It's just a strange old world we're living in. So today I thought we'd work on moving my sunset further forward. Last week I showed you just my basic fabrics. I had this lush box of glowing fabrics. So this colour particularly, I have used this so much since I bought it. I can't even remember what I bought it for now, but often, you know, these impulse purchases can pay off if you just, you know, go follow your instinct and it says buy that fabric. I've used it for all sorts of things, and it's lovely how it sort of can be contrasted with other colours. It goes really well with sort of these bright colours, bright pinks and so forth. It can really add a glow to it, and depending on what sort of stitching colours you put on top, or possibly, you know, you can layer it over with some organza or something like that. You can knock it back a little bit or change it a little bit, but I just love it because it's been so useful. So what I've done to move myself forward is I've made myself a couple of little sample pieces, which I'll try and show you close up when I put my board down. That's like the top sunsetty bit, and then I made a watery bit for the bottom. Okay, so those two bits go together, and that's been really helpful. I've eliminated the fabrics that I don't want to use. I've narrowed it down to the ones I do, and that's always really helpful if you're a bit overwhelmed by what you've got colour-wise. Simplifying it can just be really helpful, because then your head's not going, oh goodness me, so many possibilities, you know, so many choices to be made. It's a bit like life really, isn't it? There's too many choices, you just actually go into a meltdown. So this is really, really helpful. It's, as I say, it's given me a sort of a focus for what I want to do going forward. So what I'll do next is we'll move into doing laying out, cutting my lovely fabrics up into strips and laying them out, and we'll just see where that takes us. The whole process isn't necessarily set in stone. You know, things can happen between sampling and finishing, and you know, it's also, you've actually got to do it. I find there's this sort of, it's like, do you remember at school when you had to write an essay and you kind of put it off and put it off and put it off? There comes a point where you've actually got to commit to the colours that you're choosing and say, well, that's it. I could choose all these other ones over here, but actually for this picture that I'm doing, or this piece that I'm doing, these are the ones I'm absolutely going to use, and I'm just not going to be led astray by another little box of fabrics over here that says, oh well, you could just put this colour in as well. So I'd say you probably need, I don't know, I've probably got about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sort of 6 base colours here, and onto that I'm going to put other colours to sort of do some blending. I've done a little bit here, but I'm going to do more of it as I get the other strips down. And it's a bit strange because obviously I've worked in quite a small scale here, which I'll show you close up to the next bit, and I've then got to step that up into the next, what's the size, the bigger size. And although it's not vast at all, you know, I'm not working on huge great canvases, there is a step to be made in doing that as well. So it's all a process, nothing's set in stone, as I say. It can all change and blend as I go along. So it's like a good cup of tea. You know, you wait till the end, and it's lovely by the end. But you know, whilst you're waiting for it to brew, that's a funny analogy, isn't it? I don't quite know where that one came from. Sometimes my head comes up with these weird things. So let's get on. Let's turn the camera down and let's get down to the nitty gritty. So these are my 2 samples that I've got now here. I've got this very vibrant coloured one at the top, which is like the sunset area, and then what we've got down here is the reflection in the water. And it's quite funny because I actually moved on from these original sorts of bluey colours that I had originally. I had all sorts of things going on in my head, and then I found this lovely lilac-y piece of fabric. It's quite shiny, which is nice for water. It's got a nice reflective quality to it, and that just made me go, oh yes. And once I put this little bit of lilac-y purpley, I don't know what colour this is really, but that sort of shade there, that really kind of all came together. And when you put a little mount on top of it, that really helps to pull it together, and I can see then, you know, how much needs to be the water, how much needs to be the sunset, and I will refer back to my original photograph that I was given as well. So that's been really helpful. It's helped me focus on the fabrics I want to use, the colours. And now, so let's just find my bits and pieces here. There we go. And I'm going to cut some. I've got some strips here which I'm going to put on. Look, even my scissors match. Isn't that lovely? So I've cut some of these vibranty, I don't know what your colour this is really, tangerine or something. And I'm just going to pop these on here. So I'll pull that down a little bit. You're not quite with me there. There we go. Let's get these on here. And I've got some red. So in actual fact, I only really need perhaps 3 of those, because down here is going to be the lilac-y colour, isn't it? And I've got some red to put on here, and I've got some more colours to put in the mix. I'll just get my pink, bear with. So I've got some lovely, lovely pink here, which is going to go in the mix. It's almost like you can't have too many clashing colours with something like this, and things that you wouldn't initially think are going to go with it suddenly actually really go well. It's a very strange thing. I think sunsets can be so many different colours, to be honest. You know, you think they're just all, I don't know, orange and red, but actually they have many different sort of shades and hues to them, I think. So I've got these sort of quite bright colours, oops, but I've also got things like this. I haven't got very much of this. I need to find a little bit more of this. This was a nightie, would you believe? This was somebody's nightie. Apologies if it was yours that I bought in the charity shop. But this has got a really nice colour. And I put it, if you look at my sample, I'll show you my sample again. I had some dark going across the top, and then there's some purpley in the middle, and then there's some more purple down here, and then there's some more of this maroony colour down here. So it's how you kind of put it together. That's what gives it the strength, and it's the lights and the darks. And then once you embellish them, you know, things really start to come together. They really start to hum, because you're able to blend your colours like you would if you were, you know, using paint. And this kind of cuts out, I think using fabric cuts out the initial bit of mixing, you know, if you're putting paint out and you have to know what colours make what colours and things like that. This is a much more direct way of working with colour, I think. And that's, you know, it cuts out that first little bit, and then it's at this stage that you're starting to mix your colours up and see where that takes you. So I'm going to have to get a bigger bit of this. So I'm going to cut out more of these strips. I'm going to cut out the base bit, and we will try and get this pulled together. So here's this gorgeous lilac fabric. I'm not sure where this came from. I usually know where things come from. I think this was something from a show that my daughter and I went to, possibly I don't know, something like knitting and stitching. For those of you who go to that, that's that wonderful show at Harrogate and London and Dublin, which sadly at the moment isn't happening really. Now, wait a minute, what am I doing with this? Let's get my head on here. I think what I'm going to do with this, I'm actually going to cut a big enough piece that will go right across this, because what I want to do with the bottom bit is pull together. It's going to have very thin pieces going across, making the water ripples. You know how you get the water ripples going up like that? So it'll all come clear. It'll all become clear as I work with this. It's always a slow process, this bit, trying to just put your fabrics on. And also, something I have to be mindful of, when you're embellishing, don't forget to leave yourself plenty of fabric spare at the sides and at the base. Make it bigger. See, that's a lot bigger, and I will overlap things, because when I embellish this down, it's likely to scrinkle in a bit, and you will lose your edges, and you'll pull it in, and you'll wish you'd cut a bigger piece. And that does happen to me even now. I do that. And the other thing I was going to mention is relevant at this stage, actually. Let me just put that on there. Where's my other? I've got my bigger frame here. Look, this is the one I had last week. So you can start to see, I think what I'm looking for is a kind of a third of sunset. I think that's probably some golden rule or something. I want like a third of the sunset at the top, and I want about 2/3 of the water at the bottom. And that's showing through there, but it doesn't matter at this moment. So you see, you could be doing more sunset. There you go, that's quite funny, isn't it? More sunset at the top. But I think what I'm looking for is more like that. So I think what I might have to do with some of these is maybe cut them either thinner, or I'm going to have to add more strips across. And the other thing, as I say, I was going to say was, think about your edges, think about how you're going to frame what you're making. So because this is going to be behind a mount, I think, then it doesn't really matter what my edges look like, but they have to go obviously right out and allow space for them to go behind the frame. And if not, you're going to have to think about whether you're going to tuck your edges over like that, perhaps, if you're going to do something that's going to be top mounted. So anyway, that's enough talking about it. I'm going to take it over to the embellisher and just see where the process takes me, and I will show you as I get on. I've never actually embellished this fabric before, and I'm just loving the effect. Especially, I'm watching you on the camera screen as well, and it's creating all these fantastic rainbows. And I'm just doing it quite lightly, just to hold it in place. Because actually, with this sort of fabric, I don't want to embellish it too much, because I think it'll start to sort of shred. So I've pinned the other pieces of fabric on that I'm going to be using, and it turns out actually, because of the ratio I'm going to use, there's actually not that much for the sunsetty bit. Actually, it's going to be more about the water, but we will just see how it goes. We can always add bits in, and bringing colours from the sunset into the water is going to be the challenge. Just remember, if you're pinning your fabrics on when you're embellishing, it's a bit like sewing. Just make sure you get them out in good time. And certainly don't want an embellishing needle hitting one of those. You can see how embellishing it kind of knocks back the shine a little bit, which is quite nice because that is very shiny. And by the time you stitch over that, you don't really notice that it's been embellished. You just think that's the fabric. And I'm not too concerned it's pulling apart, because this is what I say, you know, your fabrics always shrink when you use your embellisher. Unless it's a stable fabric like a wool or something like that. They generally shrink, and it's worth doing a test piece to see what happens to them. So I'm not concerned that there's a gap here, because I'm going to be filling all of these bits in, and it's a little bit scary doing this because I have to, as I say, make a commitment to exactly what I'm putting on. But again, the lovely thing about embellishing is you can, if you don't like what you've embellished down, you can just simply pull it off and there's no harm done. It's really rather marvellous. And this is such nice background fabric to use. It's a very soft and gentle fabric. It's very accommodating. And I think especially if you're doing quite a few layers, that can be quite useful to have a soft base, rather than something, you don't want anything too stiff, because you can always add stitch and tear to the back of this for when you're doing your free machine embroidery, which is probably what I will do. Sometimes when you embellish your fabrics down, you actually get enough of a stiffness to it that you can just stitch into it, but generally speaking it will maybe pull in a little bit when you embroider with your free machining. So a bit of stitch and tear will help stable, or some other kind of, you know, stabilizer. Other stabilizers, I can't even say it this afternoon, other stabilizers are available. So I'm going to carry on with this, adding more and more fabrics to it, and then I will show you at some point when I get to that point, I will know when that point is. It's just it's a game. It's a game of daring do. You have to just put the stuff down and have a go, and gradually it'll come together. And I guess doing a painting's just the same, really, or anything you're doing that's creative. You have to just take the plunge and jump in and get going. So let's see where we get to.